What's up, folks? Welcome back to TacticalTortoise. We're doing Grotsmas yet again. It's another day, and I'm doing videos for the Grotsmas calendar every single day, as long as y'all keep watching them. Today, we're talking about Grey Knights and their new Warp-Bane task force. Now, I know this has been one that a lot of players have been excited about. Grey Knights have been pretty pillow-fisted throughout the entirety of the edition, and people were hoping for a way to do some damage. We might have gotten that here. At least it's an interesting detachment to talk about. As always, like I said at the top of the video, I'm going to keep doing these as long as you keep watching them. Please drop a like in the video, subscribe to TacticalTortoise, do all those YouTube things, and let's talk about this Grey Knight detachment. I think I'm also going to be live after this video goes live over on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/TacticalTortoiseTV. I'll probably either play this or I might dip my toe into the new Thousand Suns detachment, which looks like a disaster, but at least we can figure it out. So please go give me a follow over there and let's play some frickin' games, dude. So what is up with the Warp-Bane task force? Now, first of all, what I like to do with these single detachment factions is talk about what you lose when transitioning over from their existing detachment to the new one. In Teleport Strike Force, the original index detachment, you end up giving away your weird advance effect that the detachment gave you. You had auto 6 on advances, and your advances automatically gave you fly. It was kind of strange, given the fact that the detachment is all about teleporting around the table. You didn't really use it very much. It was good on Nemesis Dread Knights, and then like almost literally nothing else really used it. Occasionally it was good to get into weird positions, but you're not really losing that much from the ability. However, you do lose stratagems like Mists of Deimos and Prognosticated Arrival are core to the Grey Knight game plan, and while we do have some kind of apes of those in this detachment, that is going to be a huge loss. And in the comparison, I don't know if that means that Warp-Bane Task Force looks particularly good when compared to the original Teleport Strike Force. But it's up for you to decide. Let's talk about what the detachment does. First off, its detachment rule is Hallowed Ground. This is just a Shadow of Chaos. A Shadow of Greyos, if you will. The Grey Knights learned it from watching demons, I guess. Depending on the level of control that you have over areas of the battlefield, your deployment zone is always considered hallowed. The center of the table is considered hallowed if you have half of the objective markers there. Your opponent's deployment zone is considered hallowed if you have the objective marker in your opponent's deployment zone. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. In addition, Purifier squads specifically get a 6-inch aura of hallowed ground. They're the Bellicors of the Grey Knights, I guess. Now, what do you get when you are inside the Shadow of Greyos? Each time a model in your army makes an attack, you get a hit reroll of 1. Now, importantly, this is not keyed to Shadow of Greyos or Hallowed Ground. You always get hit rerolls of 1. That's basically just the detachment ability. Honestly, pretty good. In addition, if you are either a Purifier squad, which is always in Shadow of Greyos anyway, so I don't know if that matters so much, but also if you are wholly within your Hallowed Ground, you can reroll all hit rolls instead. So if you are in your deployment zone, wholly within 6 inches of a Purifier squad, or you are a Purifier squad yourself, or you have control over the middle of the table, then you're going to get full hit rerolls. That's huge. So I think reasonably, as long as you're building this detachment correctly, this army is basically like always full hit rerolls, sometimes hit rerolls only of 1. That's pretty good detachment ability. So let's talk about some enhancements that we can use alongside this. The first one is Mendulian Reliquary. This gives you +3 OC to the bearer if the unit is not battle shocked. That's okay. Unfortunately, there is no Prognosticated Arrival in this detachment. That's the 3-inch deep strike from the old detachment. So it's a little difficult to sort of utilize that to switch objectives by yourself. I don't know how often this is going to be taken. There are going to be some interesting situations where you like do some teleport shenanigans with maybe Nemesis Grandmasters. Might be an interesting place for that to be. Radiant Champion. Infantry model only. No Nemesis Grandmaster for this one. The bearer's melee weapons have precision. In addition, while you are wholly within your army's hallowed ground, your Shadow of Greyos, each time a melee attack made by the bearer scores a wound, the target of the attack suffers 1 mortal wound in addition. Because that's an additional mortal wound, it also has the precision ability. So you could potentially swing 5 times into a unit, hit them 5 times and kill 5 guys, then assign 5 precision mortal wounds onto a character in the unit. This enhancement is fucking nuts. I think Brotherhood Champions, which already get full hit and wound rerolls against character models, are going to be the perfect place for this, but you can also just put it on anything. This is also only 15 points, so you can just put it on an infantry character that you have. I love it on the champion. I think that's my favorite one, but also on Terminator characters, it's probably good too. This is just really nice. You're probably stacking an additional 1 or 2 damage every time this guy swings, and if you can combo it out, you're probably doing 3, 4, or 5. Wild. Vial of the Abyss. Grey Knight infantry model. Only models in the unit have stealth. Pretty solid. It is expensive. Stealth isn't the greatest effect to have, but it's definitely not bad, especially with how resilient Grey Knight infantry tend to be. That affects everything, including the character and the unit, even if the character is separated from the unit. Lastly, Paragon of Sanctity. This one seems interesting, but I don't know if it's as good, if only for the fact that I don't know where you put it. It's any Grey Knight model, so you can put it on Dread Knights and stuff. Once per battle at the start of any phase, the bearer can select one friendly Grey Knight unit within 18 inches of it and visible. If it does, until the end of the phase, that unit is within your army's hallowed ground. It's an interesting question whether you're visible to yourself. I actually literally don't know. Having read the core rules, I don't believe that that is the case. A model is visible if a part of another model can be seen from the observing model. So visibility, by definition, requires that you draw line of sight to something else. I don't know if there's rules commentary covering this because I haven't looked it up, but it doesn't seem like it works that way. That would be really good in that case.
To be clear, though, you can draw line of sight to your own unit, assuming that there is another model in the unit visible to you. So you could use this on a character who then grants their own unit hallowed ground, but you can't do something like attach this to a Nemesis Grandmaster and then give himself hallowed ground with the enhancement because he can't see himself.
This is also a 10-point upgrade, so I think it's mostly a points filler. It'll be nice to have. I think this detachment's going to focus very heavily on epic heroes, so I don't know how many slots you have to take it. It definitely feels like a very good flex pick if you do have the opportunity to take it, but I don't know how often that's going to happen. So with that, let's talk about some stratagems. We're starting incredibly strong with this one. I think literally the first stratagem on the list is the best one. Sanctified Kill Zone. You use it in your shooting phase or any fight phase. You select one Grey Knight unit from your army that has not been selected to shoot or fight, and is wholly within your army's hallowed ground. Until the end of the phase, each time a model in your unit makes an attack, reroll a wound roll of 1. If you're a Pure Aspire squad, full rerolls instead. We were hoping for some ways to get some damage through, and full wound rerolls on some units is pretty sweet. Given the fact that Purifiers are always considered to be within hallowed ground because they're always within 6 inches of themselves, they are always eligible to get full wound rerolls, and they also always reroll their hits. So the Purifier squads just go absolutely nuts, I guess. They can jump out, fire their like 10 or 20 random anti-infantry little psychic shots, full hit and wound rerolls, and then also flame you with 4 incinerators, full wound rerolls, then charge you, and then get full hit and wound rerolls in melee as well. This also will affect things like characters of the unit. So Castellan Crow has a devastating wound sword. Getting full wound rerolls on that is huge. I think that this stratagem will be used basically as often as you can use it. Flames of Sanctity is a little bit weirder. You use it at the end of the fight phase, although it doesn't say whose fight phase, so you can use it on both yours or your opponent's. You select one Purifier squad from your army that was eligible to fight. That's the kind of standard boilerplate wording where you have to have at least either charged or at some point been engaged by an enemy unit and been selectable. You then roll 1d6 for each enemy unit within 6 inches of your unit, adding 1 to the result if you have Castellan Crow in your unit. On a 4+, that enemy suffers d3 mortal wounds. You basically deadly demise yourself, essentially. You don't die, but there is a chance that you add mortal wounds to everybody within 6. How often you're going to get a lot of enemy units within 6 is probably a little weird, and pulsing mortal wounds like that is not great, but in situations where you have to kill 1 or 2 enemy models out of a unit in order to flip control of an objective, for example, this is going to be hugely beneficial. Next one is Hallowed Beacon. I love this stratagem. It's so Demons of Chaos-y, but it has a very annoying targeting restriction. It targets a Grey Knight infantry unit from your army that is arriving using Deep Strike or Teleport Assault. However, you can't target Terminators. No! Every Grey Knight infantry model is a Terminator. If you set up your unit wholly within your army's hallowed ground, you can be no more than 6 inches horizontally away from all enemy units rather than the normal 9. This is basically, it's just Shadow of Chaos, but we have to pay a CP to get the Demonic Incursion Detachment part of it. The Shadow of Greyos is becoming stronger. I think that the express intention of this is that you use it to get your Purifier squads into melee. You can jump in 6 inches away, flamethrower your opponent's screens, and then charge in, get full wound rerolls from Sanctified Kill Zone, and I think Purifiers are actually definitely solid in this list for sure. The one downside, obviously, you can't put it on the big stuff, so you can't put it on things like Brotherhood Terminators. They would get hit rerolls if they're wholly inside your hallowed ground. The cool thing about hallowed ground as well is that you calculate the control of the center of the table at the end of the charge phase. So you can 6-inch deep strike your stuff, charge onto a bunch of objectives, flip control of those objectives with your super high OC Grey Knight infantry, and then make sure that all your fighters are in hallowed ground. Things like Brotherhood Terminators have lethal hits on the charge, so they would get a huge benefit from rerolling, but it's so hard to commit them to melee when you don't have any charge buffs outside Kaldor Drago, and you can't use Hallowed Beacon on them. There is some funny use case of this, however, where you can do things like drop interceptors next to an opponent's objective and then shoot and move with. So 6 inches away mostly means that it's very difficult to screen them out from taking the objective. That's pretty cool, and then they'll flip control. For that reason, their ability to flip control of objectives is huge. The other thing is that it does require that you are wholly inside hallowed ground, but that simply means that you basically use your purifiers like a Bellacore, where they drop in somewhere, and then you also can drop another unit next to them in order to get them into the fight. I think that's going to be how this detachment typically works. That Terminator restriction makes it so sad, but I do think that maybe without the Terminator restriction, it would potentially be just a more aggressive version of the teleport strike force, where you're already taking like 20 or 30 Terminators. You're just using them to charge instead of using them to score objectives and then Mist of Deimos away. Fires of Covenant is the next one. It's another mortal wound bomb. We have a lot of mortal wound bombs in here, but that's always kind of the Purifier Squad's shtick. So I guess it makes sense to me. Fires of Covenant is used at the start of your opponent's movement phase. You can target any Grey Knight infantry unit from your army until the end of the phase. Each time an enemy unit is set up or ends a normal, advance, or fallback move within 6 inches of that unit, roll a d6, adding 2 to the result. If your unit, not the enemy unit, importantly, the unit you're targeting, is wholly within hallowed ground, on a 4+, that enemy unit suffers d3 mortal wounds. This is a weird one. Could be useful if your opponent's trying to like score secondaries with a 1-wound model or something like that, but honestly the upside of this stratagem is kind of annoying. If you could use it reactively, like as soon as an opponent triggers it, you could use it and then also project the aura for the rest of that phase. That would be kind of cool, but the downside is your opponent knows you're doing it, so if they don't have to move within 6 inches of you, they just won't, which I guess could like protect you a little bit, but honestly most units in the game can suffer d3 mortal wound. Aegis Eternal, used in your opponent's shooting phase after an enemy unit has selected its targets. You target a Grey Knight infantry unit from your army that was selected as the target. Until the end of the phase, models in your unit that are wholly within hallowed ground have a 4+ invulnerable save. Our purifiers have an invuln save against shooting attacks. They don't have access to true silver armor in this detachment, which does make them much easier to kill, but a 4+ invulnerable save can kind of counteract that. The big high AP infantry sweepers will have a tough time getting through that, so I think it's solid. Repelling Sphere is the last one. This one is bizarre. You target a Grey Knight infantry unit from your army at the start of the opponent's charge phase. Enemies that select you as the target of a charge that phase, subtract 1 from the charge roll, or 2 if you are wholly within your hallowed ground. So I think part of the intention is that you can play very aggressively with your melee infantry, deploy aggressively, shoot, charge, kill a bunch of stuff, and then you have an invulnerable save and potential charge prevention and this weird Fires of Covenant movement prevention minefield, I think, whatever you want to call it, to try to prevent your opponent from being able to kill you on the crackback, but I don't know if they're going to work. I do think that there are going to be situations where your opponent's trying to get like long charges into your back line. This having no targeting restrictions other than infantry is really good. You could use it on things like your servitors that are holding your backline objective, or when opponents are trying to counter drop you. So let's say they deep strike their own stuff in, and even with charge bonuses are going to make a 6 or an 8-inch charge. You can then give them -1 or -2 to charge, and they'll probably fail that. That's really good, and your opponent has to consider that when they're trying to make those long bomb charges. If you are committing directly into your opponent's army, and they are going to be next to you, this is probably not going to affect you. It's good in kind of a skirmishy game, less good if you're just up in a straight up fight, which I think is kind of what this detachment wants you to do. So I don't know if it works perfectly, but it's a nice tool to have in the toolbox. So with that, let's talk about a list build for this detachment. Okay, so here we are in New Recruit, and I'm actually recording this entirely different time than the rest of the video because I built a list that I was very proud of and I thought was very cool, and it turned out it didn't work. I was building it around a Brotherhood champion in Purifier squads. You can't do that though. Brotherhood champions, for whatever reason, cannot attach to Purifier squads, which blew my goddamn mind. But I learned that after playing a game with the detachment over on stream, on my live stream. You can go watch that game if you're a Twitch subscriber. But that gave me a little bit of insight into the list and the detachment, and I've refined things a little tiny bit. So here's what we got. So we have Caldor Drago and the Brotherhood Terminator Squad. Drago is mostly in here to buff that Terminator Squad. They want to get hit rerolls if they are within your hallowed ground, and that will allow them to trigger additional lethal hits. The detachment is no other way to actually get a Brotherhood Terminator Squad into melee besides just normal deep strike and rapid ingress stuff, which I'm not super psyched about, so we have Caldor Drago in there to deliver them. That's our big kind of like hammer blow unit. The rerolls on the lethal hits gives them a huge amount of flexibility. If you're punching up into something super high toughness, you can just fish for lethal hits, assuming you're getting those rerolls. Any critical hit effect loves to get hit rerolls, so you're looking good. We also have a strike squad because this army is very aggressive, so we want to either use it to screen our backline objectives or lock in objectives either in our deployment zone or in the center of the table in order to ensure that we maintain our Shadow of Graos, or just to lock in the back objective and then be able to leave it, because a lot of the army is teleporting forward in order to push super hard. We also, this is a little bit of spice, have a Silencer Purgation Squad. Now, the biggest downside of this detachment is that it has very few ways to deal with screens. One thing that you can do in the standard Grey Knight detachment is you can like push forward a unit, clear screens out with it, and then either force your opponent into Mists of Deimosing or force your opponent to go in for like super long charges and contort themselves to try to deal with this unit that's playing very aggressively, or it's just a Sigil of Exigence squad and like nothing can touch them anyway. This detachment can't do that because it has no reactive effects whatsoever. It commits and then its units stay there and then they have a big fight. So in order to be able to make that big aggressive push, we need a way to clear out enemy light units without exposing anything. Enter the Purgation Squad. Now, the downside is Purgation Squads have to fire indirectly in order to do this well. The upside is that if they're doing it from your deployment zone, or if they're next to a Purifier Squad, which almost 100% of the time they will be, they get hit rerolls while they're doing that. So the Silencers, you're able to fire 24 shots. Something has to have line of sight to whatever the Purgation Squad is going to attack. I would love to have been able to fit an Interceptor Squad in this list, because then you can combo the two together. You can move up the Interceptor Squad, use it to target the Purgation Squad, then fire a shot from the Interceptor Squad and run them away. We don't have that in this variety of the list. You can maybe drop some stuff to take it. I think you would have to cut Terminators at that point, because we're like right on the cusp here. We're basically like as efficient as we can get. So I don't know really what is available to be dropped, but that is a potential. However, I think in most situations you can get a safe line of sight to something that's running up in the front of your opponent's army without your opponent really being able to deal with it. All you need is one iota of one model to be able to touch it. You could even do it with a Terminator, for example, and then if they shoot back at the Terminators, you pull that model and then regenerate him the next turn. So I think it's a little dangerous, but that's likely the risk that we're going to have to take. So a little bit of spice in there, and then following that up, we have 3 Purifier Squads. I have a big unit of 10, those guys equipped with Incinerators, so that's kind of our big hammer unit. You can use the other Purifier Squads to drop them off in the center, use them to fire their flamethrowers and all their purifying flames. You can give them full wound rerolls in the shooting phase. Then they charge in a 6-inch charge if you use the 6-inch charge stratagem. Then they do the same thing in the fight phase, so a ton of damage from those guys. And then 2 additional Purifier Squads. These guys are either for utility or to add rerolls to your other units, and then when you come the late game, they can come in and push really heavily themselves. Following that up, we have the sort of the big hammer blow, I guess, units, no pun intended, are these 3 Nemesis Dread Knights. The rerolls on this unit is insane. It makes them so efficient. The downside of the Nemesis Dread Knight is that they've always been super random what they're going to do. Either they're firing a low volume of ranged attacks that are super random, or low volume of melee attacks, same deal. The Nemesis Demon Hammer and the Heavy Psy Cannon with hit rerolls suddenly become so much more efficient. The Nemesis Dread Knight in this attachment is incredible, so we have put 3 in there. That also gives you a strong sort of on-table presence as well, because those guys can advance and charge, so they can run up and actually present a pretty reasonable threat range. Now, I have one with a heavy incinerator to do a little bit more sort of infantry sweeping and to act as a strong overwatch threat, and wherever you need him, you can position him around, and then 2 of them have Gatling silencers. I like to keep those 2 guys on the table to give you a little bit longer of a threat range in the early game, because you're going to have 2 24-inch range weapons on those guys rather than one 18 and one 24, and then the heavy incinerator incinerator guy you can use as a teleporter in order to sweep infantry. You can sort of deploy him up in really aggressive positions where your opponent might not get too many angles on him, and then you can use him to either sort of sight for the purgation squads. You can use him in deep strike at the beginning of the game to rapid ingress him. There's a lot of different things you can do with that guy. But the heavy silencers is really kind of new technology. With the hit rerolls and sustained hits, these guys usually convert 100% of their hits, if not more, and that makes them good into a variety of targets. And it's so many shots, you're usually getting 12 to 15 hits out of this weapon that you are going to be punching some damage into high armor save targets, and then into smaller targets, you're just looking great. Once those guys are followed up by the Purifier squads, and you can start to give them reroll ones in melee with the Stratagem, and they're getting full hit rerolls from the detachment ability already, these guys start to do absolutely incredible things. Nemesis Dread Knights are great in this detachment. It is a little unfortunate that we have another detachment in which Nemesis Dread Knights are great, but I think when you make a profile that is fast, good at shooting, and good at melee, and then buff its accuracy, turns out that's a good combination of effects. And then last and maybe least, we have a Calidus Assassin in here just to add another teleporting model, and largely to be able to blunt opponents' stratagem usage against your aggression. This detachment is so unreasonably aggressive that the turn in which you are doom dropping your opponent, you have to be taxing them, in my opinion. So you want to be increasing the cost of things like Overwatch, of things like Armor of Contempt, of things like enemy offensive stratagems. You're basically gonna try to toilet bowl the fight into this big brawl where these Purifiers and these Brotherhood Terminators are bouncing off of each other to then get these good charges into the heart of your opponent's army. And then once your opponent deals with that, they then have to deal with 3 Nemesis Dread Knights following that up. So that's going to create this big scrum, and the more CP economy that you can tax of your opponent in that position, the better for you. So I think the Calidus Assassin is in there as a utility unit. Obviously, she's great at scoring objectives. She also gives you an additional unit that can uppy downy every turn, but more importantly, in my opinion, she's also going to be improving your chances to win in that big fight, that big engagement that you end up having. So that is my list for this detachment. I think it's a little spicy. It's a little different than the original list that I had planned for this video, but obviously that list didn't work, so we've recreated it with a better one. I'm so interested to hear how Grey Knight players are feeling about this detachment. It definitely feels like a totally different paradigm, which I appreciate, and I'm excited to see it on the table. So with that, thanks for watching all the way to the end of the video. Thanks as well to everybody who supports the channel, either over on Patreon, patreon.com/TacticalTortoise, YouTube channel members, and Twitch subscribers. All you people are amazing. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming.